If this post has crossed your path, then I believe the algorithm is working for you. Because I absolutely believe that the energy that is working right now is the energy of bringing things to those that are meant to hear it. So day 3 of channeled messages, of me basically using my phone and just bringing the message and putting it on YouTube and allowing YouTube's algorithm to do its thing for you. What's today's channeled message? Just because you forgive somebody does not mean you have to allow them back in your life. And actually, this is something along my journey that I've had to learn, and I use my journey to help empower people to heal and grow, because I know the things that I've learned along my journey, I were meant to learn for you guys. Forgiveness is a big thing, and it takes a very, very long time, I believe, for us to reach a place where we can actually truly forgive another for the things that they have done to us, especially family members. We gaslight ourselves a lot to believing we've forgiven before we've actually forgiven, because we want to just be rid of the uncomfortable emotions. We want to be rid of the burden and the power we feel that other person still holds over us in the hate and anger that we may still hold. And I know this firsthand with my family. I had told myself for years and years and years I'd forgiven, but I actually hadn't forgiven. I just wanted to believe I'd forgiven because I just wanted to end something that emotionally had taken so much from me for so long. And when I realised I hadn't truly forgiven, that's when I went on the journey of allowing myself to process the feelings of hate and anger that I felt. Because to forgive, you have to go on a process to first validate what it is you've experienced and how it's impacted you. Because at first you need to forgive yourself for believing you deserved it, that you may have been at fault. Forgive yourself for constantly trying when things are clearly not getting better and getting hurt time and time again. Forgive yourself for expecting that you have to love people beyond loving yourself. And the first process of that is validating that what happened to you was actually very, very real. It's very, very painful. And then you have to go on an exploration journey of looking at, actually, anything anyone else does is never about you, it's about them. And this is something I learned on my healing journey. That when I went through the things I did with my parents and bullies at school and teachers, and I'd always believed it was about me, when I really started to explore how they were, what they experienced, I realised that it wasn't about me, it was about their pain. Because how can you make something about a child? A child who is not fully grown, doesn't have a fully developed brain, a child who's only learning the behaviours from the parents, a child who's learning their behaviours from environment. So to blame the child is to actually disconnect from the accountability that you've had any part, or people around you have had any part in your upbringing, in your environment, in your experiences. And when I realised that actually to blame a child as if I was in control of my reactions to things I've experienced was just a deflection. And I know this channeled message is about not going back to toxic people even though you forgive them. But in part, I have to tell you this because forgiving is the biggest part. You don't have to find forgiveness. But it does, along your healing, naturally occur when you... And actually, it's in... the reason why forgiveness is important is not to forgive those people, but to forgive the situation in the belief that it was ever about you. That it was ever about the fact that you wasn't good enough as a child, that you wasn't good enough as a person. Because everything you learn and was given to you, was passed down to you, was inflicted on you. And actually, when you look at that for yourself, you can look at that for them. Because if you are behaving in ways like that because of the product of your wounding, then that is why they're behaving the way that they are, because they are product of their wounding. And this helped me massively along my journey of understanding Because to heal something, you have to some degree, understand it and bring it to your awareness. But it helped me realise that all those times I felt I must have been hated or not wanted or not loved or not, the real truth was that they were so wounded they didn't know how to love, that they weren't ready for a baby. It didn't necessarily mean they didn't want me or didn't love me. They just didn't know how to. And that makes us angrier, doesn't it? Because the more we want to love, the more we want to be close, and the more we can't because of our wounding, the angrier we become and the more triggered we become, because the shame internally holds us captive because we don't want it to be that way. Because how many times have you shouted at your children or got angry at your children or those around you and then felt shame and guilt afterwards and not known why? And then what you've done is you've tried to push that trigger away and not do it again, but then it happens again and then you feel shame again. We all do it because we're all human. And when I started to realise that actually some of the things I were doing was from my wounding, the things that they were doing from their wounding. But one of the things that I did learn massively, and this is actually the biggest thing, because when I started to forgive and I started to feel love because I felt for them and their experiences, I thought that I could rebuild a relationship. I was like, now I've forgiven, now I am forgiving, now I love and I can understand, I want to bond with you. Because naturally our heart wants us to bond, doesn't it? And quite often the bonding actually is just the forgiveness part. Because just because you've forgiven doesn't mean they're not still toxic. And this is the key part. If a parent is not wanting to take accountability, not wanting to recognise some of their behaviour, not wanting to change some of their behaviour, and they still hold the toxic traits that wounded you in the beginning, it doesn't matter how much you forgive or you're healing, by being around them, you are going to re-traumatise yourself. Because it doesn't matter how much you heal and learn different ways of dealing with toxic behaviour, being around toxic behaviour constantly is going to impact your mental health, and it's going to impact how you feel, and it's going to keep you stuck in this inner child of not feeling good enough. So the things that I've learned is I can forgive, and it's taken me a long time. And again, I'm not here to say that everyone has to reach a place of forgiveness, because it's not actually about forgiving the person to say that what they did was okay. It's not about that. I've been through some horrendous things that I'm not going to sit here and say my forgiveness means that I am saying what they did was okay. My forgiveness means I understand that it wasn't about me. I have worked to feel my hate, and I've understood that what they did was about them. And that made me realise that what I do is about me, because it is my duty of care as I become older to heal the wounds that I'm also passing down, because I'm just like last generations. We're so busy looking back and blaming the past generations that we don't see we're holding it and passing it down to the next generation. And this is not shaming anyone, but the amount of people that I see that are blaming their parents for the things that they've been through, naturally, because that's what we do. I was one of them. But then they are hugely traumatising their children through alcohol abuse, drug abuse, or not being there for their children, neglecting them, and their justification is, well, what they've been through. But then when their children raise something to them, they get angry with their children because their children don't understand what they have been through, not realising that as children, you felt the same way. And to break this cycle, we don't heal overnight and we don't shame ourselves, but we realise that our actions are coming from a pained place, and that we have to turn our attention away from the people that wounded us, not fully away. You know, you have to focus on them to some degree to heal, but turn it on ourselves. What's our healing journey going to look like? How am I going to heal? How am I going to take my power back? And when you start, or if you start forgiving, your forgiveness is not going to stop somebody else being toxic. And your forgiveness is not going to stop somebody else from having poor behaviours. And it doesn't matter how much you love or try and unconditionally love or try and understand and hold space for them. Behaviours do impact you and do impact people. So this is how we learn to love from afar. And actually, it's enough to have awareness to forgiveness. And again, forgiveness does not mean you forgive what they've done. But you forgive the situation because you can have an awareness to an understanding of how ancestral trauma passes down. And this takes time. And first and foremost, you do have to navigate and feel your anger. You can't bypass your anger. You have to validate it because that's what your inner child feels because it's been unheard and unvalidated. So anger is very normal. You need to either work with somebody, whether it's like myself, a trauma-informed holistic therapist, to understand how to navigate that anger, allow that anger in and not allow that anger to drive your behaviours. But validate that you are allowed to be angry. And this is not saying that you're not allowed to be angry at your parents, but this is saying that living in pure anger will be like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It just never happens. And that drives your behaviours to keep you caught in a really unhealthy place that's never conducive for your happiness and healing. But when or if you have reached forgiveness and you are trying to integrate people back in your life and they are still toxic and you're trying to just bypass the toxic behaviour because now you understand and have an awareness, that's still really unhealthy for you. It's important that if you recognise that somebody hasn't changed or doesn't invest in their own healing or accountability, then no amount of your forgiveness and love is going to make your relationship bond deeper. The next part of that work is acceptance that who you would love them to be isn't who they're going to be because they're wounding. They are just so turned away from it. And unfortunately, in this lifetime, it's not their journey to heal it, but it's yours. And when we reach and work on a level of acceptance, we can spend limited times with that person, holding some amount of boundaries and some amount of awareness, because awareness is not excuse. And I have to say this, to have awareness for your loved one's behaviour is not to excuse their behaviour. And if you've spoken to them or tried to hold a boundary or try to deal with things differently and they're still as toxic, then that's your cue to recognise that you've got to learn acceptance that the relationship's never going to be what you would like it to be or want it to be. And I see so many people trying to cling on because they crave this love so much that what they're doing is they're denying themselves self-love. So that's why they still feel stuck in hate, because they're running after and craving love from another instead of and bypassing love for self, because every time you run for love for another over yourself, you're not having love for yourself. So you still stay angry and feeling stuck. And you have to remember that love for yourself is one of the most important love. Because if you bypass your own needs and your own love for yourself to accept another and love another, you will never be at peace. You will never be happy, because you are not here to support yourself and only yourself, but you could never be a healthier version of yourself or the most loving version or connected version of yourself if you bypass yourself and your needs constantly. I know this feels really hard, and it felt really hard for me at periods to have to realise that no matter how much actually I felt a love now for my parents and I felt a bond invisibly because I understood that to some degree there's still some behaviours going on there that would detrimentally affect me because I am healing and because I have grown and because no longer I'm going to fall back into old behaviours that served them. Because remember, unhealed toxic people create dynamics for other people for them to project their wounding onto, especially in family dynamics. They create scapegoats, they create the problem child, the golden child, because they want to create, and this doesn't necessarily change just because you've forgiven. Forgiveness is about awareness. It's about healing ancestral bonding without actually sometimes having to have that full bond. Because my parents know I forgive them, and they forgive me for certain things. And that is enough for healing. That is enough. We don't have to be bonded together for that bonding to have healed us. I'm hoping this video has brought something to you. I just bring channeled messages that Spirit want me to bring, and I know it will land exactly where it's meant to, and you take from it what it is you need. And if there's any questions you have for me underneath, I am a trauma-informed holistic therapist. I specialise in energy healing, behaviours, understanding trauma, understanding the impacts of childhood adverse experiences. And I do work one-on-one with people. I do work, which you can find me in my socials or my website underneath here. But I send you so much love. And please know that if you've come by my post, Spirit are guiding you to your healing journey further.